the government program they've come out with is not helping the farmer. We're forced into a situation where we need the government payments to survive, but that is not helping us. It is putting us further under the control of the government. It's putting us further under the control of lending institutions. It is putting the farmer in a position where he is not working for himself, he is working for the banks.
So the local banker, don't always blame him for your problems. It goes back further than the local banker. In fact, it goes all the way back to 1913. The week before Christmas, most congressmen had gone home. They had made sure that just enough stayed in Washington to pass what they wanted to pass in the form of the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve Act gave a private entity the power over the American dollar. Now, that year, Mr. Lindbergh, the father of the great aviator, who had flown his aircraft successfully so much around the world, he was the head of the banking committee of the House of Representatives and was so disturbed over what was happening because he knew the issues involved in the Federal Reserve until he wrote a book warning the American people that the Federal Reserve could be the destruction of our economy. But no one listened to him, and the Federal Reserve Act went through, and very few people thought much about it until the American dollar started going haywire. And then what do we find out that the Federal Reserve really is? Some have investigated it, and have found out that the Federal Reserve is really not an agency of the federal government at all. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned corporation, and the people who own the majority of the stock in the regional banks of the Federal Reserve control the currency of America. Who are those individuals? Well, in our research, we found out that over 1/2 of them, owners of the Federal Reserve, are not even citizens of the United States of America. Yet they control the interest and the general welfare of our country financially. So, who is destroying the farmer? It goes much further back than the local bank. It goes back to who controls the interest rate? The Federal Reserve. Who controls inflation? The Federal Reserve. Who controls the dollar in relation to foreign currencies? The Federal Reserve.
America is we're going to wind up with land in the hands of a few. It'll be probably corporations, and when they get that, then America's going to know what hunger is, because those people are going to, whenever that comes to that, they're going to sit down and they're going to tell you how much food they're going to produce at what price, and either you pay it or you don't.
If our government can bail out Chrysler Corporation and can save Continental Bank in Chicago, bail out New York City, why can they not save the family farms and the agricultural industry of this nation?
I've got 4 children, and I don't think one of them would want to take over the farm. My oldest one, my boy, he tried farming once, and he had to sell out and quit. He couldn't make a profit enough to pay his bills off. There's nobody to take her place.
And that's what concerns Ralph Baird the most. There's no one to take the place of the American family farm. And with one farm going under every few minutes, Ralph knows that the experience of that family farm is gone forever. You just can't replace that kind of knowledge overnight. It takes years to grow a farmer. It takes years for them to learn the land. And without sons taking over, family farms such as Ralph's are disappearing from the face of America.
They just do not realize the gravity of the situation. Sometimes, some of these days, this food might not be here like it is now. It seems to me like it's almost a conspiracy to get rid of all the small farmers.
Ralph has farmed all his life, except for the 3 years he was in the Army during World War II. He was shot down over Germany and spent 15 months in a POW camp, so Ralph Baird knows what it's like to live through hard times.
We couldn't hardly eat the first meal we got because our stomachs had shrunk too much. And to this day, it makes me disgusted to see somebody turn up their nose at food, because I know what it is to be hungry. People don't realize. They take everything for granted, most people do.
Maybe Ralph's right. Perhaps we Americans do take too much for granted, and maybe it's time we started to heed these warnings. World War II was only 45 years ago, and with farmers going under every few minutes, soon there won't be any more family farms, only corporate farms. And that just doesn't make any sense.
No, it don't make any sense. The people who live in town and work for these corporations and have to go out every day and do what they want them to do, and it'll almost be like it is in Russia. That's what I think it's going to do if something don't change.
I was in Canada just recently, and the man who was sponsoring the meeting, his son was a car dealership owner. And I asked him, I said, what does an American car sell for in Canada? Oh, he said, let's take a $20,000 American car, would cost $30,000 in Canada. I said, why? He said, because of the American dollar in relation to the Canadian currency. Now, when I went to Canada, I got $1.40 of Canadian currency for $1 of United States dollar in relation to the United States dollar. Well, what does that mean? That means that foreigners cannot buy American products because the Federal Reserve has determined on the world market that the American dollar is worth so much more in value compared to foreign currencies. But we can afford to buy foreign products. They took our electronic industry and moved it off to some foreign country. They took our automobile industry and moved it off to Japan. When you buy a product anymore, what do you find said on the product? Made in Hong Kong, made in Korea, made in Japan. Where are the days we said made in America? So what's happening to the farmer? He can't sell his products abroad. Who determined that the farmer couldn't sell his products abroad? Who controls the American dollar in relation to foreign currencies? The Federal Reserve.
The European common market countries, the French in particular, they subsidize their grain. Their farmers are getting over $5 a bushel, while ours are getting here $2 a bushel here in the United States. And they make up the difference. They make certain that their grain sells in the world market while our U.S. farmers, his grain does not sell, and we're sitting here holding the huge surpluses. We've even got the U.S. government subsidizing Argentina's sales overseas. Gave them a $300 million loan this spring so that they would be able to reduce the price that they would sell their products in the world market.
For the first time ever, the United States is importing more grain than we're exporting. The storage bins in this country are overflowing with surplus grain, grain that is rotting, and yet the United States is importing more grain. We keep hearing that foreign grain is less expensive than U.S. grain. We keep hearing it's to protect consumer prices. But the price of a loaf of bread at the grocery store hasn't decreased, even though we know the price of grain has. Over 60% of the consumers polled stated they would be willing to pay 4 cents more for a loaf of bread so the farmer could get a fair price. And yet the farmer can't even pay for his costs. When asked why America didn't buy England's raw material at a cheaper price, a famous politician replied quite simply by saying, if we buy England's raw material, then England will have America's money and America will have a finished product. But if we buy American raw material, then America will have the money and the product. It's true the world is becoming a fast-paced agricultural market, and countries such as Argentina, Brazil, Australia, and even China are producing more food than anyone ever thought possible. And U.S. grain export markets are receiving heavy competition. But to import grain with such a surplus doesn't make much sense. Some people say that foreign countries, such as Argentina, owe the United States banks so much money that the only way they can repay just the interest on those loans is by selling their wheat in our markets. Is it fair to allow the American public to repay Argentine loans while the American farmer and the rural way of life are destroyed in the process?
They've got nowhere to turn, no place to go. The chain has been broken, their heritage destroyed forevermore. When year after year they planted their soil, asking only to serve. They were called by the land, they felt chosen to farm, and a pond was formed with the land. But now there's nowhere to turn and no place to go. Oh, why are we allowing the family farm to die? They trusted in men and in government too, to help them care for the land. But their trust was betrayed and their spirits were sold, leaving God's caretakers with nowhere to turn